What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and normally I'm analyzing apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information. But today we are interviewing. Sorry, I totally blanked on your name for a second. Today we are interviewing David from the Recovering from Religion project or organization. David, do you want to tell us, who you are and what you do over there at RFR?
Yeah. So name is David Teachout. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, psychoeducational coach, and photographer. But I also volunteer with the Recovering from Religion Foundation. Basically, there's an organization that helps people like me, and likely most of the people, if not all the people listening, to basically, as you're both questioning and having already left your religious faith behind and looking for, building that community back up, not exactly based on, sin and wrongness.
Right. Well, I know that y'all have a fundraiser live stream thing coming up where y'all are going to be fundraising for RFR. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, RFR is a nonprofit. So, with all the programs that we offer, it does not come cheap. So we are doing our annual or semi-annual fundraiser, and that is going to be June 24th. I got the J's in my head here. So it's in a couple of weeks. It's going to be at 3 p.m. Central, where we will be live. People like Daryl Ray will be there, as well as a lot of other big names, in the secular community. Here, just raising money for all of the programs that RFR offers. Again, that's Saturday, June 24th at 3 p.m. Central. And I'll post a link or give that to you so that people can join live and see how things are going.
Yeah, I do believe y'all are doing it on the line this year, right?
Mm-hmm. I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because I know Jimmy actually contacted me to see if I could help fill a spot or something like that. During the live stream.
Yeah. You're gonna be one of our, big name guests. So
big name.
Hey, you're bigger than I am. So I mean, I don't know where I stand, but yeah.
All right. Well, I can't wait for that. I don't recall when I'm supposed to be on, but I know that I've got some work stuff coming up, so hopefully I can mitigate around that. But in any case, so with Recovering from Religion Foundation, what kind of services does the organization provide?
So, primarily, RFR is about, again, providing that community. So groups, we've got multiple, online community groups, most states based on many different themes, everything from secular sexuality to, women's only to, we have a bunch of resources concerning, abortion and sexual health. We have volunteer, of course, or we're helping them out as well. So we have like a weekly hangout for just the volunteers. So again, really wanting to make sure that people are supported not only in participants, but also then on people who are helping out. We have a Monday RFRX talk, which goes out as a podcast and on YouTube video that is live. And then the recording goes out later. And of course, then after each RFR talks, each speaker will hang out for a certain amount of time afterwards for some off the record, conversation. It's a lot of fun. I've been on that for, I think I just passed 20 times a little while ago. So I'm going for, I don't know what number I'm going for at this point. But it's a lot of fun. We love hanging out afterwards, usually hang out for a couple hours. But there's always people there, fielding questions, and again, encouraging that kind of reflective dialogue that we really want to encourage everywhere. We also have a call-in line for anybody who is having questions about, their faith. These are trained people, not necessarily therapists, but trained to not only just encourage those questions, but encourage the fact that it's okay to ask without necessarily proselytizing. We are not here to convince you that your faith is wrong. Obviously, there's going to be conversations that come up. Good. We want dialogue, but that's the point. Isn't for us to preach the good news of atheism, whatever the hell that even means. But it's like we're here to help you in your process of exploring what it is to be, a human being. So we have got that helpline. We have, of course, the Secular Therapy Project as well, which I'm a part of, and that involves essentially, therapists, well over 700 at this point, who have I think the last count was well over 32,000 clients have helped out across the United States, in also, I believe, 7 other countries, in which licensed professionals who are operating from a evidence-based therapeutic background are then engaging with people from a secular perspective, rather than seeing the professional space of therapy as a means of proselytizing, which unfortunately way too many people still do. And in fact, that's a big topic that I work on with clients, is exactly that kind of secular, or rather religious trauma, coming out of fundamentalism, coming out of other therapy relationships where, they were told, if you pray more, let's open up the Bible and study together. Of course, obviously without any prompting, and usually to the protest of the client. By the way, unethical, but here nor there. We're here to support your process without proselytizing. The P without the P. I'm going to totally offer that as a T-shirt. That's awesome. All right, this is an idea. I'm going to have to make a note to myself. Anyway, so we're here just basically helping people out, and as well, good timing, frankly. Because we actually also have the fall excursion coming up. And let me get the exact date on that, because totally fun. But that's September 22nd through the 24th. It's going to be in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And big old multi-room cabin, food's included, lodging's there. You basically show up. Lodging's not included, by the way. Lodging is actually, you have to get yourself there. You stay in this big old, building with everybody. It's a small-ish group, and basically you have presenters all weekend long, as well as just a lot of fun, and basically hanging out with a whole bunch of other secular people, where you don't have to worry about your sense of humor, for one, and you don't have to worry about anything else for that matter. Because we're there just to support one another. I was actually there and presented last year, and it was a lot of fun. Really good, meeting a lot of really fun people from all over the United States and from other countries. We actually had a couple of people, I think, from England, and a couple other people from Australia. So we're international. But you can check all of that out, and of course anything else at the recoveringfromreligion.org as well.
Okay, cool. What did you speak on last year?
Last year, I talked about basically critical thinking and our propensity for getting involved still, even as secularists who are supposedly dedicated to following the science. We are still human. So, we have our biases, we have our issues still, because we're still animals, with our, evolved brains, figuring stuff out. And so basically it was a big talk on checking in with yourself, the fact that biases can creep up, regardless, you're not going to get away from them. that there are practices that you can do in order to mitigate the effects of those, as well as I like poking a bit at anybody. It's how I left the faith anyway. But basically poking a bit at the fact that quite often, statistically speaking, those who say they're dedicated to reason are often exactly the people who don't see just how much they're having problems with bias and poor thinking and so on. So it's basically a call for reflective dialogue and humility. So it was a fun talk. Met some really good people from it.
Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty awesome. Now, as far as your role at RFR, you're part of the Secular Therapy Project, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I'm licensed in Washington State and South Dakota, which is where I live, and basically you can go to Secular Therapy Project. There's a link from the recoveringfromreligion.org site. And basically you put in your information, what state you are in, and you'll get, connected with a licensed therapist in your state. If there isn't one, then, we can still answer questions. I get questions from people in other states all the time, as far as what to look for in a therapist, what to, kind of watch out for just in case, it's ideological kind of proselytizing does not require religion to occur. What's therapy all about is often, questions that, and in fact, it's been probably 2 or 3 of the presentations that I've done for RFRX on Mondays is exactly what the nature of therapy is. Why do we do it? Why is it important? And why it's exceptionally good to find somebody who is not there to, convince you of their own philosophy, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, so I'm kind of curious, is like the looking up for therapists in your area and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that, is it pretty much only focused on like religious trauma, or can it just, like, if you just need a therapist in general, not necessarily, because of any kind of religious trauma you might be suffering, but maybe you just want a more, secular therapist instead of like a very religious therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. We are not specifically just for religious trauma. It is therapy in general. Obviously people have some specializations, but even then, by and large, therapists are trained in most things. It's very much just simply finding somebody who isn't going to, give a religious bias. If you're looking for, not to say that it's lesser than, religious trauma, but you're just looking for communication skills and emotional difficulties. They don't have to necessarily be from religion. It could be from family. It could be from dealing with the world. It's anything. It's really anything that you would go to therapy for. That's what that's what we're here for. We just happen to be coming from a secular perspective. And every single one of us has been vetted rather thoroughly. Last count, I believe they still, deny about 30% of the people who are, asking to join the SDP, which to my mind is a good thing. It means that the vetting process is solid and rigorous, so that they're really making sure that people who, from either one are simply wanting to spread some other form of religion, or for that matter, who are there for the sole purpose of incensed from. It's like, we're not here to make your life worse. We're not here to go rah rah rah. That's right. Let's hate everybody who doesn't, from that same background. I'm like, no, this is about therapy. This is about helping you live life in line with your values, in line with your goals, and being directed accordingly. So you lead this. We're not here to become your guru. So.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Because I have to admit, I thought that it was primarily just religious trauma that y'all dealt with. But it's nice to know that if people are looking for therapy just in general, that the Secular Therapy Project is a good place to turn to for good resources and to get in contact with people that's not going to try to shove a religion down your throat while you're getting therapy. Because I mean, me being from North Alabama, it is really hard to find like psychiatrists and therapists that aren't religious in some kind of way. So
Yeah.
it's a really helpful service that y'all got there. Now I'm just kind of curious. I don't know how much you can talk about this, but like, what are some common issues that I guess maybe get brought up in the religious trauma sort of niche, not niche, but like vertical or whatnot of the Secular Therapy Project?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for all the therapists involved. I can, only speak for my own. But and not everybody even specializes necessarily in religious trauma. That's its own, niche as well. It happens to be one that I do, but but even then, it's going to be about sense of purpose and meaning. I mean, for many people, either who are leaving or have left some form of religion, whether or not it's a strict, more conservative fundamentalist one, or a bit more on the liberal side. Either way, you've left something or are in the process of doing so that has likely been provided a structure for your family, for your friendships, your morality, your very sense of self. How do I think about the world? Like, this whole thing is now, in theory, I'll get to that in a second, but in theory, it's now defunct. Like, wait a minute, now what's left? Who am I? What do I believe? The old joke is it now okay to eat babies? It's like, and the answer to that, no, of course, is not. But still, I mean, it's like you're still left with this because that's how most of us were raised then, is in this idea that if you don't have said authoritarian God, therefore you are meaningless, life is meaningless, ethics is impossible, and so on. So we're raised with this, basically false dichotomy of either, moral or not, God or not. And the result often ends up being that even after we've left, we get stuck in this process then of saying, well, wait a minute, what do I now need to do in order to rebuild my sense of ethics and purpose and meaning? Now, not everybody will agree with me on this, but my perspective on that there is actually that's the joke's on the other side, actually, because the reality is that the religious ideology that you're brought up with is not just false, but has always been false. So it's not that there isn't the particular God that you were brought up with. It's that there never was. So you were never actually getting morality or meaning or purpose from a deity because they never existed. So you never were getting it from there. So the question immediately comes up in my mind is, well, wait a minute, where were you getting it from? And the answer is the same place you're going to get it going forward: community and yourself, period. Like that's the whole thing. Like nothing has changed other than the kind of acquiescence to a particular structure. But as far as the source is concerned, i.e. your community and yourself, and your own capacity for passing judgment on what is good and proper and right and meaningful, it's still you. You were still the one, even as a believer, that had to say yes to when, supposedly, well, how do we know what is right or wrong? Is it right or wrong because God says so, or is it right or wrong and therefore God acquiesces to it? Well, there's an old debate. well, shoot, I went to Bible college. And that was the one that came up more than once. So it was going to be a pastor. That didn't work out. But it's like there was a question, and the answer ends up being that it was always about us creating morality and wrestling with these questions about meaning and purpose and ethics. And whatever deity ended up being created was just glommed onto kind of it's the icing on the cake of our own, meaning production. And that hasn't changed. So rather than having to recreate our sense of morality and purpose and meaning, quite often it's about recognizing that you already have it. And now it's then a matter of stepping into, well, so then if humanity is at the center of these questions, rather than a non-existent deity, then how does that change maybe the particulars of things? We don't have to start completely over. We are still starting with us. We just cut out the middleman, or perhaps the referee almost of a false deity, and go, well, now we're just going to finally see it for what it's always been about, us, and what the hell we're doing here. So, so that's what it often will end up working, with a lot of clients on, and where I see a lot of that, because the story often is we buy into, oh my God, I have to create everything up from scratch now. And it's like, no, you don't. You've got a heck of a foundation already. It's just kind of roughing out, smoothing out the edges and recognizing that, maybe some certain particulars of how that ethics were put into practice, you might want to change. But that's up to you, as it always has been. And even then, you might actually find that some things, depending on how you were raised, you're actually okay with. And it doesn't matter if they came from, your religious background, because you're still the one saying yes to it and deciding and, what it means and expounding then on what it means in practice. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of curious, in your experience, have you come across a lot of people that have a problem with like self-worth issues? Like people that just think really down about themselves and just really negatively have like a lot of negative self-talk. I'm wondering if what are your thoughts on that?
It's it's certainly not a to have such things. It's not a prerequisite that you grew up religious, but at the same token, there's often an added weight. Especially when you get into some notion of innate sin nature as exists in the big three religions. Slight variations in there, but still relatively similar. This notion that it doesn't matter what you do, there's still something intrinsically wrong with who you are at a cellular level. That eats away at you. And, the notion, in fact, one of the last talks that I gave was on like how I think the title was therapy is not a sacrament. And this whole notion of, we still often will buy into this story of us being broken, that there's something inherently wrong with me. And it's actually a phrase and metaphor that I almost never use professionally or personally for that matter, because, well, one, I don't think it's helpful, but two, I just don't agree with it. So, I think it often stems from that religious or quasi-religious background, that it's not just that you're doing something, it's that there's something inherently wrong. And I could not disagree more with that. We are trying to figure stuff out. We are, trying to figure out meaning and purpose and ethics in a state of never quite knowing if we're right or wrong. There is that probabilistic knowledge piece here that we now have to struggle with once you've gotten revelation out of the equation. So the scientific humility that is involved in reflective dialogue and searching, questioning, these things don't mean we're broken. It means we're profoundly and indelibly human, and figuring this stuff out together is exactly where, one, we've always been, and two, always will be. And so rather than broken, we are in some ways almost like, a metaphor I've used is, every perspective is kind of like a pinprick through the shroud of ignorance. And we're looking at the vastness of the universe through these tiny little holes through that shroud. And we think we see everything. We don't. And so part of that is then recognizing that from a place of humility. But then here's the thing. If we step back enough, then we can look around and go, wait, all of these other people are poking holes in this thing. And we're trying to figure this out. And maybe if we can have better dialogue and get along and really start delving into, how are you seeing this? Oh, you saw this piece. Oh, what about this piece? Then we start piecing these things together. And even if we'll never quite get a full picture, it's better every single iteration, every single conversation we have. And that's the hope. And not only then, through organizations like Recovering from Religion, but also in therapy, is that encouragement to self-question, that encouragement to actually enjoy doubting. It's not an evil thing. God's, well, one, doesn't exist, but two, isn't going to treat you like Job, where the fundamental sin that he had was, he could doubt his family, he could doubt his people, he could doubt every single thing. God didn't care. Let's keep torturing this guy because, anthill, magnifying glass kind of thing, until what? He started questioning supposedly God's purpose. There is no line here for us. Truly, you can question every last piece, and that's okay, because guess what? All the rest of us are doing it too. So you're not broken. You're just in the same boat and trying to figure it out. So yeah, but that self-doubt, that self-worth thing is very much a piece of it. And it takes different time frames on figuring it out, and recognizing that that's not the only way to view yourself and people around you, for that matter.
Yeah. Well, I asked that very specific question, and I hate to spring this on you. And I know I've said this a couple times already, but I've actually got a clip of me talking to a Christian, and he says something that I feel is very concerning. He's taken it in a completely different route, but I'm wondering if I could possibly get like a secular therapist reaction to this particular segment of the clip. Okay. Cause I'm going to share my tab, this one, share audio. There we go. Okay. So this is Joe, on the right, and he goes by Gospelologian. And I reacted to this entire video recently on my channel, but I've got my own, past with therapy. Like I've been to a therapist for a couple of years and really worked hard on myself. But, in that I've picked up on a lot of different red flags, and I feel like this is a giant red flag. And I just want to get like, what is your opinion on this particular segment I'm about to play? Okay.
I am a depraved wretch. I am a great sinner. I'm a worm. I do not deserve any of God's grace. I can't think anything without the help of Christ. I'm nothing without the love of Jesus in my life. And I'm nothing. I'm nothing. It doesn't matter. Yeah, God's given me a brain, but that's only to be used to glorify him. No, I'm not some great being that gets to make all my own decisions and do it. I am a piece of pottery in the potmaker's hand, and the only hope I have for my existence is to somehow glorify him in that and just praise him that I get to spend eternity in with heaven, completely undeserving of any love or any grace. If God used me up for miserable suffering my entire life, as long as he was glorified, I'd be cool with that, because that's better than anything I would come up with by myself.
I wondered if it was going to be something along those lines. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm just kind of curious, like, because my takeaway is that that's like a highlight of a very toxic codependent relationship that is kind of baked into Christian theology, not all Christian theology, but is obviously his particular version of it, which would be more aligned to or more akin to like evangelical Protestant type of Christian theology. And so I'm just kind of curious, what are your thoughts on that particular point of view in the Christian community?
You know, one, I was there. I mean, during my time as a believer, my favorite verse was, let me see if I remember this right. I think it's Philippians 4:13. That is no longer I who live, but Christ that lives in me. I mean, it was the whole idea being was exactly that. Myself is meaningless. I am a dirty, broken wretch that is utterly worthless and filled with contempt. And the only way that I have any meaning, purpose, or the capacity for doing good is not even really myself. It's literally when God looks down that he doesn't even see me, he sees his son, was, of course, the salvation message. And, you know, in retrospect, it's an interesting thing. And I'm laughing, not because it's any less heinous hearing it again, but because it is. But because at this point, there's a piece of me that goes, I don't buy it. Like, I hear it. I hear the language. It reminds me a bit, and I'm forgetting the exact concept here, but it's like a luxury belief. It's something where people will say things, but when you ask them to put it into real practice, they have no idea what they're doing. Because let's take that at face value. Like, literally, there is supposedly nothing that is in any way redeemable, good, worthy, or anything manageably positive in his life. Does he ever have a positive day? Let's bring this down even to a positive second. At any time when he wakes up in the morning and he just kind of maybe forgets for a moment that he doesn't actually believe this stuff 24/7, and he kind of looks out his window and sees the bright sky, and maybe looks at his dog and goes, wow, the dog loves me. Ooh, and then it dawns on him, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to think that. That's right. But the thing is, you are. So you don't actually believe this. Like, not in an all-encompassing thing, not in a sense of, like, say, I believe in gravity. Like, I'm pretty solidly in my belief in gravity. I'm like, if I see a cliff, I'm not going to go walk off past it. Like, it just, because it's not just that I believe it, like, I believe it. This isn't something that I just happen to think about the universe in. It's not something that I just come up with some new fancy phrase to somebody that, will hit me hashtag, God forgives. I mean, it's kind of like, this is something that is indelibly affecting how I actually live my life. And the reality is all of these people like him, myself back in the day, most believer, like, they are living their lives truly as if none of that stuff is real, because they can't live as if it actually is. The entire thing is performance art. which is where I think is where you get the fervency at times, because the rabid kind of the fundamentalist, like, frothing madness that comes out in that kind of, like, it's almost like, it was fascinating watching that, because it's almost like it's a training that people go through in order to speak in tongues. Yes, you can get trained in that. It's very cool. But, but it's that thing, like, he just rattled it off. One, because he's memorized it. He probably practiced it in the mirror. He sure as hell has practiced how to shave, how to cut that beard of his. It was magnificent, by the way. It's like this entire thing is a show, but it's where it gets sad. And this is where it's like, I'm not being this isn't meant to be condescending. It's not meant to be dismissive in the sense that, no, I actually think you do believe it, but not in the sense that you think you do. I think many people believe it as a kind of, I am part of this community and I need to say these things in order to show you that I belong, because ultimately that's what this is all about. I'm weirdly struck, no idea why, but all of a sudden popped in my head. The Clan of the Cave Bear series by Jean Auel. I probably just butchered her last name, but there's a point in the first book, Clan of the Cave Bear, where the central character, who essentially she's Homo sapien living with a group of Cro-Magnons, and she doesn't quite realize that she's different yet. And their fundamental way of punishing people and killing them, essentially, was to ostracize. You are cast off from the community. And in fact, one version of sin, one version of hell even, is to no longer see the light of God. You are cast away from this. Sound familiar? I mean, ostracization is at the bedrock of pain for people. To not belong, to not feel connected, you don't get any more fundamental to that. Every notion of ethics, integrity, meaning making, you can create all the meaning you want, but unless you have anything to share with it, it's pointless. So, so what happened is she did something, the main character, did something where she was cast off. Like, you were too different, you're done. You're out of the cave. Lo and behold, she was able to survive just fine without that. She learned new skills because she started questioning the things that she was taught, because she'd never been told otherwise as well, and certain other things of, well, that's not possible. You can't do that. She never got taught that. So therefore went and did it anyway. And then eventually her journey is about finding other people like her and feeling that sense of connection. But remarkably, even within those other communities, often the fundamental way of punishing people was to separate them. And so there's, when you find that group that just bonds, as come as no surprise to anybody, most of the time you're going to believe the things you were raised with. No gee, real shocker there, I'm sure. It's just like, gee, what you were raised to think is often what you're going to continue thinking later on in life. Okay. And so even in, when it comes to, things like, hallucinations and other psychoses within mental health, you very rarely have somebody raised as a Muslim suddenly hallucinating Mother Teresa. You don't generally have somebody raised in the reverse, suddenly hallucinating visions of Muhammad. I mean, it doesn't generally happen any more than we've seen throughout time as entertainment shifts our vision of what it means to be abducted by aliens, whatever, that the images that people come up with, the stories that we tell, have changed over time to match the entertainment industry and what the collective, kind of collective consciousness now believes, aliens supposedly look like. Well, I guess they've, changed in line with Hollywood. Who knew? But, it's like, that's just how it ends up happening. And so you have people like this where, and again, like I was one of them, but remember preaching almost verbatim, many of the same things that he was just saying. And where you have to believe this, because to stop believing it is to then, and here's where we're coming back full circle to that whole thing of you don't have any meaning, purpose, or ethics outside of this structure. He's bought into it. Like if I don't keep saying this, I am not going to have any meaning, purpose, and ethic. So I have to keep this. It's the bubble boy phenomenon, where, if only you were actually to pop that bubble, you're actually going to find out you survive anyway. In fact, there was a group of us in my Bible college days who all of us went through a process of deconversion and never study philosophy when you're in Bible college. Bad for you. So there were like half a dozen of us that deconverted. And there was a point where one of them was struggling with it, and he decided to do a thought experiment for himself. And that was, he was going to live a week as if there was no God. And like, what was the difference in his like day to day, taking a crap, eating breakfast, like really all of this stuff. I mean, because sure, if you were to, I don't know the rest of that clip. I don't know the rest of the conversation, but you pay attention. And often when you start asking like details, everything's big. Like everything's like, well, there's, the principalities of the air that we have to fight against and, government overreach, like all of these big things, because basically it's just cosmic narcissism. But if you really get down to like, really, you need to think that in order to sit down on the toilet? Do you really need to think that in order to cut into a juicy steak and enjoy Popeye's chicken? Like, really, and I do not have any buy-in to Popeye's chicken. It's talk to Matt. But it's just like, it's like, do you really need to think these things to live and breathe and kiss your spouse and love your children? When you, in fact, even love your children, when you put their drawings and their weird crayon markings that they have lovingly given to you, and you put them on their fridge, do you sit there and go, wow, my child is a piece of shit, and the only way that this has any meaning is because I'm seeing the work of God through these crayon markings? Like, really? No, you don't. Like, you just flat out, you don't actually think this. You don't. And so right there, you're going, then it's not really the belief that you think it is. This is a luxury because you live in a country that by and large is one of the freest on the planet, that allows you to mouth off inanities without really suffering consequences. It just doesn't, there's like, if you stopped, you're not going to lose your job. Or even if you do say this on a, national access podcast, on YouTube, video, people stumble across it from your work. You might get a little like, or you might actually get an invite to your church. Who knows? But nobody's going to sit there and throw you off a rooftop or lose your job over it, or otherwise do anything other than, well, that's nice. So it's an easy thing to say because you're never actually asked to put it into real practice. It's one of the first things that I came after leaving the faith was that the best people of still believers that I've ever encountered have been the ones that don't sound like that, because they're not interested in performance. They're interested in, and this is more of that humanistic streak that has been within Christianity since almost the beginning, really. And that is, dogma matters less than how I treat my fellow people. And that kind of thinking doesn't lead to anything other than self-hatred and hatred of others. And what makes it even worse is that it's a performance. it's not even something that they're generally doing universally. So you have to end up picking and choosing. And therefore, how awful is that you are actively having to select who is going to be viewed through this cesspool of a vision of humanity in order to find some kind of support to keep thinking it and saying it, because you can't live it fully. So you have to be selective.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like really labor intensive to like
Huge.
have to think about that like all the time. It kind of feels like it only comes up whenever you're overtly professing like something about your faith, or in this guy's eyes, this is actually a positive aspect of his faith. He thinks that this should convince skeptics to like become Christian or believe in his particular version of God. And he thinks it's like one of the most powerful arguments for his position. And that has thoroughly confused me ever since I heard him say that, because I just don't understand how because you know, it's not like if I went up to you and I was like, hey, you want to feel like shit all the time? It's like, no, I don't. Like, what are you talking about? Like, well, I got a faith over here that'll make you feel like shit constantly. You want to do that? No. Like, I don't know who would want to do that.
Why am I supposed to feel this awful? Oh, because I tell you to. Wait, so you're providing the space for me to feel awful, only to then turn around and somehow give me the cure for the thing that you told me to think in the first place. You know, I've worked with a lot of abusive relationships. That's that's textbook. It's like, here, you're awful. Oh, and by the way, the solution to feeling awful is to love me. And the only way you can love me is to acknowledge that I love you first. Right, buddy. Okay. You know, like I was in retail for over a decade, selling various things from men's clothing to shoes to supplements. You know what never worked is telling people that you're awful and that this is how it's going to cure you. What was interesting, though, is that what often did work, and ultimately why I just had to get out of the whole field, is to pay attention enough to people's innate insecurities and then give them an explanation for why they already feel insecure. Then give them the cure. So it's like, or the perceived cure. And so, you know, it's Eric Fromm, Fromm. He was a neo-Freudian, and he noted in his book Man for Himself, highly recommend really anything that he wrote, but he, you know, he noted that humanity is the only creature on the planet that could even conceive of the fact of being cast from paradise. Like, we're the only species that could ever think that somehow we are different than the rest of nature. And that kind of existential angst that, you know, Kierkegaard, Sartre, you know, and other philosophers have launched, you know, have tried to explain, that angst is that felt feeling. And there are a lot of reasons perhaps for that. Maybe not necessarily the conversation for that now, but I mean, there are a lot of reasons for that. And that innate like sense of disconnect is then where people are latching onto with their various ideological cures. And again, that comes back to that whole full circle again of the basic fundamental lie that all of us are given. And that is that there is something other within you that must be addressed. And that only by acquiescing, giving of yourself over to some authority figure, will you be able to address it. And the reality is that it was always you all along. It really was. It was always you. It was always your fellow person. And Not only, now granted that sucks sometimes because our fellow people, including ourselves, are sometimes jerks. And we don't always, can provide the better angels of our nature. Pardon the, religious metaphor there, but whatever. I mean, it's just like, we don't always show that. And so there's an enticement to search out and find out, yeah, there are a lot of problems. Wait, I mean, there's a solution for it over here. Oh, sign me up. It's why so many, even atheists who have left one religion, will often then move into some other form of conspiracy mongering and other authoritarian ideological structure that remarkably has a lot of similarities to, religion. It's just like, there's a reason for that. Why? Because the rest of it's hard work. I mean, that was the amazing thing coming out of religion, is it was raised with this notion of there's this vast world conspiracy against me. Of course, me in particular as a believer. Always has to be about me. Again, cosmic narcissism. But it's like in our fellow believers, and you're going to lose your job, and we're always under attack, and blah blah blah. I left and I went looking for that grand conspiracy. And you know what I found? I found a local chapter of like the Humanist Society where they were struggling to have enough funds for snacks at their meeting, and who's, the several meets through it. And I'm going, so we've had 3 speakers on why we need to be able to get along with religious people and why there's some really good history here and so on. I'm like, where's the conspiracy? Where is the devil worshiping? Like, where is it? And then you find out it just doesn't exist. And you're just going, you need this. You need to keep this story, this fiction alive, that the world is against you, so that you can then say and name things like he did, that if you were to really try to live authentically and consistently, you'd hate yourself, truly hate yourself, not performatively, but truly hate yourself. But you can't do it. So therefore, there's always something that must be slain. There's always some fight that has to be done as a kind of avoidance strategy for the fact that you don't actually believe this. Not in any real sense of day-to-day, moment-to-moment activity. You just don't. And it's really unfortunate and really sad. And not sad in the sense of pathetic, but just sad. Like truly awful that your life that could be so much fuller is living this performance. And, the rest of us are over here, not necessarily always having a good time. I mean, we struggle. But we don't struggle to perform either. We struggle because life is hard, but we don't need to make it any harder.
Yeah. Well, and kind of going back to something that you said, that being that, this entire the thing that Joe there expressed would sort of be convincing this to somebody that already kind of feels that way, that they're already feeling awful about themselves, and then he's providing sort of the faux solution for it. I've always kind of likened that to, have you ever seen the movie Big Daddy, where the kid's jumping around and he like vomits on the floor, and then Adam Sandler just puts a newspaper on top of the vomit? Yep. I kind of feel like that's what a lot of people do with religion, as far as like mental health and things of that nature go, is that they're using the religion as the newspaper to just cover up like issues, and they're not actually dealing with the issue themselves. What do you think that is the case, or do you think that maybe I'm
sometimes
from that?
Oh yeah. I mean, sometimes it is just it's a cover, because let's face it. There's a reason why this notion of a fallen world resonates. I mean, you spend 5 minutes on, Reddit, you're going to see the awfulness of humanity writ large. You spend 5 seconds on Twitter and you'll see it. I mean, it's just like you if you want to go looking for and find examples of awful humanity, it doesn't take long to find it. It doesn't take long to wake up in the morning and go, I hurt. My body hurts. What is the meaning I'm going to have? You don't even need clinical depression, so-called, in order to have these thoughts. They're just normal. They're part of everyday life to varying degrees. And so between the options of, well, I guess the Stoic struggle, Stoic/Buddhist/ any number of other points of struggle, is just indelible to life. And you kind of have to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. That story, as opposed to, are you feeling shackled by doubt and uncertainty? Well, here's the solution. You'll never have to worry or doubt again. Holy shit. That sounds amazing. Sign me up. Why do people, buy garbage, crystals and supplements online? Why do people paint themselves and go to sporting events and act like idiots? Because for a brief moment, there's that distancing between the struggle of living and the touching upon some semblance of nirvana. Some semblance of, I got to leave all that behind, if only for a bit. It's the same desire that religious people have. It's the same desire that extreme sportists are looking for. It's the same desire of people who, go off to, pilgrimages and so on. It's, can I have an experience of some form, if not, it's on the spectrum of completely in my head, i.e. what Joe was saying, to the extreme ascetic living of squandering yourself in the dirt in a cave. It's all on a spectrum of avoiding life, avoiding the reality of, this is what we got. This is it. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. Not only because, well, it's what we only have anyway. You can cover it all you want. You can put all many paper towels on the vomit all you want, and the vomit's still going to be there. But guess what? You can clean it up. It's okay. It's not such a part of life that you can never do anything to make it better. And that's where the sin notion and so on take it, is they go from, no, you can't, here's not only a cover up, but by the way, you have to cover it up because you actually are not allowed to or able to clean it up. And this, secular naturalism comes and goes, no, we can clean this shit up. It's okay. We may not do it perfectly. We may have to figure out, we may, reminded of the scene from Inherit the Wind. Clarence Darrow is talking about human progress in what it means to give up, the childishness of certain elements of faith living and going, yeah, we build planes, and I'm totally paraphrasing, but it's like we build planes, but then we clog the skies with smog and the birds don't seem as majestic anymore because we're up there with them. We reach, the moon and go, oh, wow, this is also just rock. Okay, that's interesting. We do these things in the name of progress only to find out that, no, there wasn't paradise at the other end of it. But you know what? It's okay. Because we're trying to just figure this stuff out. And that's okay. Like, we've gone from coal to electricity to, nuclear power and possibly fusion. And who knows what else humanity will figure out as time goes on. And we get cleaner and cleaner and better and more efficient as time goes on. And aren't there still things to deal with? Oh, God, yes. So many things to still deal with. But we're not, by and large, in hobbles anymore. we're literally taller because of health advances than we were 100 years ago on average. I mean, these are things that we can look for and go, yeah, the struggles still exist, but we can do better. And there's the fundamental difference with that form, Joe's form of humanity in religion, is that they're saying, no, you can't. That, they're saying the only thing to focus on and to almost hyper focus on is every last piece of negativity and make that fundamental to how you view the world. And I just look at it and go, that's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
I can accept it, and it doesn't mean I have to ignore all the good also that is happening. I don't have to ignore every time somebody helps me, or ignore every time a child was just yesterday, 2-year-old making a little pile of twigs on a trail and just gleefully playing in the dirt and the twigs and look what I built, mommy. Look what I built. And you stop and you go, that's amazing, because it truly is. It's wonderful. And we're not dismissing it because, sorry, you didn't make it for the glory of God. I mean, come on. No, I'm not signing up for that garbage. There's still plenty of good here. I don't need to enjoy, childlike creation and life. So you can keep your performance, Joe.
I totally agree. He can keep his performance. I don't need it either. But I so appreciate you coming on today, David, to sort of take a look at this clip with Joe, but also talk more about some issues that you've encountered in doing the secular therapy project and everything like that. Do you want to kind of remind everybody when the fundraiser's happening and everything like that?
Absolutely. So the fundraiser, all the information can be found at recoveringfromreligion.org. The fundraiser is Saturday, June 24th, starting at 3 p.m. Central, and looking to raise money and have a lot of fun working through that. And again, you have any questions, just go to the website. You can, give us a call. Put your information in if you're looking for a secular therapist, but show up for an RFRX. We've got one coming up on Monday, every Monday at 5:30 Mountain Time, so it'll be 6:30 Central. So by all means, show up, reach out.
Awesome. Definitely do. I am helping take part in the Lines Recovering from Religion Foundation the fundraiser that they're going to be having. So definitely everybody needs to tune in for that. Again, David, thank you so much for coming on today. It was great having your insight, and I guess we will talk to you later.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Bye, heathens.